And as we proceed to BS5 in future, there is a technology which is almost flourishing, which will have fuel cell vehicles or hybrids, plug-in hybrids or electric vehicles. Government has already announced the electric mobility mission, and a lot of efforts and focus is towards developing such solutions. One example I would like to give where standards are lagging the technology. Example is the lighting and signaling devices on vehicles. Initially, when lighting signaling devices were to be approved, we used to approve them as performance requirements, the endurance of lighting sources, and other environmental requirements, because the light sources were in incandescent bulbs. Later on, with the introduction of higher technologies such as xenon lamps was there, the standards were changed, standards were adopted to suit the technology. And then obviously with the advent of LEDs, which are there now in many of the advanced vehicles, we have a different requirement to evaluate such products. So this is an example how the technology came into existence first and then the standards were prepared. It's also interesting to see how the growth of electronic content in the vehicles has increased. This is a figure which shows how during 2005 to 2010, in last 5 years, how the content of electronics has changed in Indian context. While a lot of it goes into because of the numbers, sheer increase in the numbers. However, there is also a correlation of how the role of standards has played. On the bottom part of the screen, you will see that how the regulations were brought in. And this has given an impetus about the electronic content of vehicles. Now, I would like to touch a little bit about the overview of how the type approval actually happens in the country. We have established a system by which third-party agencies such as ARAI grants the type approval. This was implemented in the year 1991, and it was based on the European model of vehicle type approvals. The European system was established in the 60s, whereas we started in 91. So we had a clear backlog of about 30 years. That had to be filled up. When this system was introduced, we only had something called a roadworthiness requirement. And during last 3 decades, requirements such as component level approvals and other system level approvals was introduced. Various type approval, I think the slides are going to be available, so I would not like to talk a little more about how this was done. But I would like to highlight here what is the framework of regulations. When a vehicle is approved, it means it has to comply basically 4 types of regulations. One is the import regulations, second is the third-party certification, third is the conformity of production, and the fourth is the audit or surveillance requirements. So within these frameworks, every vehicle is approved something like this. At the component level, there are performance requirements. Examples are horns, mirrors, safety glasses, etc. Then when a component is tested and approved, system level approval takes place. Example is the seat belts or seat anchorages. This is done at the system level. And then comes the vehicle level approval, and then a general requirements. So in all these 4 envelopes of type approval and testing, a complete vehicle approval is granted. Vehicles which are currently covered under the mandatory requirements, they range from 2-wheelers all the way up to construction equipment vehicles. There are different sets of rules for each category, And when it comes to me for testing and approval of every vehicle, for a passenger car, there are approximately 60 to 70 regulations which a vehicle is required to comply to. Now, when we are talking about import and export potentials of the country and the penetration of electronics, we have to also remember that a global market, how it is developing. I think the national regulations, they provide a level ground for the domestic and the global players. We have played a key, we were a witness to what happened where there were only a handful of vehicle manufacturers in the country, and how we develop the regulations for them. So I would like to quickly run through my rest of the slides because the time is short. Challenges and focuses for future regulations are going to be on environment, improving the road safety, and reduce transport-related noise and congestion. With this in mind, environmental regulations, they will come into emission reduction requirements related to fuel efficiency and greener fuels and such requirements. So these are the 4 distinct steps through which country is going through. BS5 is just round the corner. This slide indicates the gap, what we are trying to bridge. I mentioned about 30 years gap. Now we are at a level where the gap is a little bit filled up, and we are about 6 to 7 years behind the European regulations. Same is there for the decade of safety. United Nations has declared this decade as the safety decade on road. And that's how the drive to establish regulations on road safety. This is a list of regulations which will come in future. And also, beyond regulations, there's going to be something which is a regulatory pipeline for road infrastructure. That is something which is going to have a large impact and penetration of electronics on roads. So with that, I would like to thank the audience for patient listening. Thank you very much.